I'm Dr. Will Ross. I'm the Vice Chair of the Commission. I'm a professor and Associate Dean at Washington University School of Medicine. This is our, I think, seventh, is that correct? Seventh getting public input. After all this time, we've collected a lot of comments, a lot of thoughts. They've all been codified through tape, text. Everything is on file, and so we're really close to completing the open discussions and moving into the next phase of the commission. It is taking all the comments we've heard over the past 7 months, condensing those, identifying the top issues and priorities, getting input from an array of leaders in the area, both locally and nationally, who will be providing their thoughts and helping to draft the final report. So in January and February, we'll be in that mode of really collecting the data, chronicling all the forums, getting the perspectives of the thought leaders, and completing a report, which we will then submit to the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. They will review that report, and we will then have that publicly available in March 2024. So we've seen that we are certainly on track to complete that work. So again, thank you all for being so patient with us. We apologize about the confusion and the time today, but everything is being taped. Will be not streamed but taped, and so we'll be placing all this on the website, the Commission's website, for all those who will want to tap in this and share these proceedings with your friends. So let's do some introductions. I'll start with, we'll just go down the panel way here.
I'm William Moore, the curator of the Senior Historical Society, and my focus there is research on race relations, and social justice. And black.
Hello, everyone. You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Great. How you guys doing today?
Great.
Thank you guys for coming. My name is Jada Brooks. I am 21 years old. I'm the youngest member on the commission. I'm a communication student at the Reparations University. And yes, I'm a child of God. I am a believer. And yes, that's a little bit about me. I spent most of my time in Ferguson, and so I think I am a victim of poverty, and I'm here to communicate on behalf of the youth. So, yeah, thank you for your time.
Hey everyone, my name is Dave Cunningham. I am a chair of the sociology department at WashU down the road. I've been really honored to be part of this body here. And okay, is this? Okay. And to be able to be hearing from you each month. And as Dr. Ross has been saying, there's a lot coming through in terms of our live stream and the recordings in terms of what people are watching. So these conversations are reverberating, but we've been compiling all of the testimony you've all been providing and really have been continuing to be guided by that. So we appreciate your presence here today.
I'm Reverend Kevin D. Anthony, and I'm currently serving as a supply pastor in the United Church of Christ. Thank you all for being here and being present over the course of these 7 public meetings. Again, as we have always encouraged you to do, is to continue to be present and give push to this project and this work that we're in the midst of. Again, thank you for being here.
Also in absent, I want to introduce Kayla Reed, who's the chair of the Reparations Commission. I think she's out ill today. We have a couple of other members who are also out ill. For all those in the audience, COVID has never left. We're in kind of a lull right now, but please be mindful that there's still individuals who have contracted COVID in the past week. So please take care of yourselves. So we're going to deviate just a little bit from our usual agenda because we have a small audience here, and we just don't want to waste your time. So we're going to actually have introduction of our speaker, and then we'll have the speaker solicit questions from you, first from our commission, then from you. Then we'll have questions from you directed toward the commission. So, Professor Cunningham, can you come and introduce the speaker?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ross. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our speaker for today, who is Dr. Jeff Ward. Dr. Ward is professor of African and African American Studies at WashU. He received his PhD in sociology from the University of Michigan. He's the author of the award-winning book, The Black Child Savers, Racial Democracy and Juvenile Justice. And currently in St. Louis, beyond his work, or including his work at WashU, he directs the WashU and Slavery Initiative. He's also a key organizer and leader in the Reparative Justice Coalition of St. Louis, and I think he'll be talking about some of the efforts that dovetail with that and also relate to our reparations considerations. So please welcome Professor Ward.
Thank you, David, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to just start by expressing my gratitude to the mayor of the city of St. Louis, Mayor Jones, for the courage and commitment reflected in the establishment of this commission and the difficult questions it's engaging. And I want to thank the commissioners for their service in that effort. As David mentioned, I'm a professor of African and African American Studies at Washington University. I'm a historical sociologist, so I've been primarily interested throughout my career in understanding the past as a social force, and including how the past remains present and potentially shapes our future, and what we can do to intervene in those legacies. I'm also director of the WashU and Slavery Project, as he mentioned, which is an initiative through the Global Consortium of Universities Studying Slavery. There are about 100 institutions around the world, mostly in the United States, that have committed through this membership in that consortium to examining how their institutional histories are entangled with the history and legacy of slavery and commit to addressing those entanglements. Just last week, I was at the first University Studying Slavery meeting to be held outside the United States in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where they are reckoning with the history and legacy of enslavement in Canada, in part through greater engagement with the African African people in Nova Scotia. So this is a moment in our city, but also in the larger world, where communities are increasingly grappling with the histories and legacies of settler colonialism, of slavery, and the various other offshoots. And I just want to mention that part of why I came to St. Louis about 6 years ago was Professor Cunningham moving here a little bit before that. And we've been working for many years now on studies of histories and legacies of racial violence and their implications for repair. So what I want to do today is talk a bit about what we've learned from, not just through our own research, but through this body of work in the social sciences about the the legacies of slavery, lynching, and other systematic racialized violence in the history of the United States. And then I'll come back to the Wash U story a little bit, because I think it's a very important part of our thinking about what reparations might require and mean in a place like St. Louis. And if there's time, I want to close with some thoughts about the challenge of reparations. So briefly, we know from a vast body of social science research now that histories of slavery, of lynching, and other racialized violence shape contemporary patterns of conflict, violence, and inequality. Studies have shown, for example, that the percent of the population enslaved in 1860 predicts today patterns of white conservatism, predicts the presence of racist attitudes among the population is related to opposition to liberal candidates for government office, that the percent enslaved in 1860 predicts the rate of lynching in a county over subsequent decades. Sorry. And this list literally goes on and on. Now, I mentioned that the percent enslaved in 1860 predicts the rate of lynching. Most of the work on legacies of racial violence has focused on lynching, in part because it is a relatively better documented history of racist violence. And those studies show a number of similar kinds of patterns. For example, related to contemporary infant mortality, contemporary rates of incarceration, contemporary homicide rates, particularly black victim homicide rates, are elevated in communities distinguished by histories of racist violence. Our most recent paper looked at how the use of corporal punishment in public schools in 11 US states relates to the history of lynching in those states at the county level. And we found that every additional lynching in the history of the county increases the likelihood that children will be corporally punished, particularly black children. The effect was about 6% per lynching in the history of the county, 6% increase in the likelihood that an African-American child would be corporally punished, violently punished in a school in those 11 states today compared to similarly situated African-American children in other counties. And by the way, this effect obtained also for white children in those counties. The effect was not as strong, but it was 4% increase per lynching in the history of the county in the odds that a white child would experience corporal punishment. Now, this is net of other factors. This is taking into account other factors like how rich or poor the community is, how well-funded the school is. We had data on how experienced teachers are, how religiously conservative the community is, a number of other factors. Net of all those factors, the effect of lynching was pretty strong, statistically speaking. And so that means for African-American children in a county with 10 lynchings, they're 60% more likely to experience violent school discipline. Now, this is a practice that the United Nations has condemned and called for the banishment of. Most countries have prohibited the use of corporal punishment in schools, most member nations of the United Nations. It's an example of the reiterative nature of racialized violence in places that are marked by histories of slavery, of lynching, and other racialized violence. We don't know as much about, and these are just some of the outcomes, I should say, I want to stress. That this list literally does go on and on. One of the most recent studies looked at voter suppression, for example, and showed that voter suppression is more pronounced in counties with histories of racist violence. We don't have a good understanding from this research about the mechanisms by which these histories continue to shape the present and potentially the future, but a number of ideas are out there, including how these histories have brutalized our culture, how they have normalized violence and desensitized us to suffering and injustice and to the corruption of the rule of law. Typically along lines of race and ethnicity, and how those are bound up with notions of national belonging. You know, who has standing, who is really an American, who has rights that we are bound to respect. I think this distortion of the moral universe and this corruption, related corruption of the rule of law, is among the most important legacies of historical racial violence. And it's one of the things that we're really motivated by in addressing the history and legacy of lynching in our own community through the Community Remembrance Project with Equal Justice Initiative. The scholar Tessa Morris-Suzuki sums up some of this, I think, very well in her book titled The Past Within Us, when she writes, quote, "We live enmeshed in violent structures, institutions, and webs of ideas which are the product of history. And though we may not be responsible for such acts of aggression like slavery in the sense of having caused them, we are implicated in them in the sense that they cause us." And we see this contemporary representation in areas like political identity and behavior, and their imprints on our political and cultural and educational and health and other institutions. This is one of the challenges, I think, with the project of reparations is thinking about who's impacted. The point Tessa Morris-Suzuki and others are making is that the victim-perpetrator binary is problematic for many reasons, but most of all because we are all become implicated in the legacy of slavery, whether or not we are descendants of the enslaved genealogically or descendants of enslavers genealogically. We structurally inherit collectively the legacies of slavery, and hopefully our approaches to reparations will wrestle with that. Now, these harms I'm talking about are compounding over time. I've written about this previously as a sort of cascade of racialized violence. You know, these legacies of lynching, for example, are present in the same places. You know, these are the same places with histories of lynching that are seeing these contemporary manifestations in terms of things like white supremacist mobilization and homicide rates and incarceration and so forth. All of this is compounding in place over generations, but it is also moving across place because people move. And I want to come back to that in a moment. This is, I think, a real challenge here and also an opportunity in St. Louis, where St. Louis is, historically and today a refugee city. When we think about the legacies of slavery for African Americans in the city of St. Louis, and for everyone in greater St. Louis, we have to consider not only the histories of free and enslaved Black St. Louisans and their descendants, but the many thousands of internally displaced African Americans who settled here tenuously before, during, and after the Civil War. Just yesterday, I was part of a meeting where a teacher at Sumner High School shared that one of his students, in developing a family tree, shared that he'd learned that his family moved to St. Louis because two of his great uncles were lynched in Arkansas. Now, there is, I would imagine, a history of enslavement in that family that traces to a place like Arkansas, but the legacies, including the trauma that I'm talking about in terms of the legacy of lynching, lives here in St. Louis. So, the mud, I think of the mud of the Mississippi River the Mississippi River is very literally the middle passage of the United States. And through generations of forced and survival migration, so much of the national and even global history of slavery and its wake settles here in Missouri and is especially concentrated here in St. Louis. Let me turn to Wash U and slavery for a moment and share a little bit about what we're finding in that initiative, which I think will be informative as the effort to pursue reparations in our city proceeds. Washington University was founded in 1853 and developed over its first half century in downtown St. Louis before moving to the Hilltop campus that was originally called, now presently known as the Danforth campus, in 1905. Several of the institution's founding leaders derived their wealth and power in part through the dispossession of Native Americans and the exploitation of enslaved African Americans. and were otherwise invested in the perpetuation of white dominance through slavery and other means. The university itself emerges amid numerous freedom suits and the infamous U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Dred Scott v. Sanford in 1857, just 4 years after the founding of the university. That case began in the St. Louis courthouse in 1846, within a mile of WashU's original downtown campus, and the university would be significantly shaped by the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that African Americans were not contemplated as recognized or protected as citizens of the United States by the framers of the Constitution. Now, it is clear from our ongoing research that many WashU founders, early officials, and key benefactors were enslavers and connected to enterprises that profited from and sustained slavery. These include Wayman Crowe, John O'Fallon, Henry Shaw, James Lucas, Charles Pope, and Derek January, among others. And we've not even begun to look at enslavement among early faculty and students, though some stories are emerging. We've been looking into all university chancellors, directors, and trustees whose lifetimes overlapped with the era of enslavement and found that nearly half of these early officials, so about 31 of 62 early officials we've identified, had direct ties to the institution of slavery, both as enslavers and members of slaveholding families, and through possible efforts to emancipate enslaved men, women, and children through ownership. And these are, I want to stress, are not mutually exclusive categories. It is likely the case that several of these individuals purchased, bought enslaved people claiming to be intending to free them and didn't, or didn't when they said they would. So they might be in both of those categories, and that was what I'm trying to stress. Separately, early research shows that just over half of all trustees and faculty of the medical school in the period, WashU's medical school in the period, had some ties to enslavement. And this is a figure we expect will grow as research continues. One of the things that's important to stress about WashU's history related to enslavement is that it is really tied up with a number of other institutions, including academic institutions like St. Louis University. Several of our early benefactors were also benefactors of WashU and helped found, were also benefactors of St. Louis University and helped found both of our medical schools, for example. John O'Fallon being one of those. John O'Fallon was one of the largest slaveholders in Missouri in the 1850s. He was also apparently the foreman of the grand jury that refused to indict the white mob that lynched Francis McIntosh in 1836. Refused to indict the mob in part because Judge Luke Lawless instructed the jury that to do so would embolden abolitionists in St. Louis. O'Fallon himself went on to become president of the Anti-Abolition Society of St. Louis, an organization that was common across the Midwest and in southern states as the abolitionist movement was growing. Defenders of slavery formed anti-abolition societies, including here in St. Louis, and O'Fallon was the president of ours. One of their key acts in 1846 was to lobby for state legislation that would prohibit the education of free and enslaved African Americans in Missouri. Now again, this is less than a decade before John O'Fallon helps found Washington University, which was initially going to be called O'Fallon Institute, in fact, I think because they wanted to access his wealth. So we're seeing all these ties between not only institutions within St. Louis, but connections between St. Louis and other parts of the state and the nation. I'll just give you one other example of that. One of the interesting threads that we'd like to pull more relates to how this raft of anti-abolition legislation that the state passed included a measure that imposed fines and fees and corporal punishment on African Americans and others who violated regulations about the time they could spend, free blacks in particular, could spend in the state of Missouri. And the legislation specifically prescribed that that the revenues raised through the fines and fees through this measure would help fund the University of Missouri. So, we have this really complex story that we're only really beginning to understand about how slavery and the struggle for freedom is tied up with the cultural and institutional fabric of our city and our state. Let me turn now to the question of reparations and transformative racial justice. This is a really exciting time in some respects, in that we see communities across the country and to some extent across the world grappling with these questions as to an extent that I think is unprecedented. I'm also struck by the gravity of the moment in the sense that what we choose to do will be profoundly meaningful, in part because it might limit what we can do next. It might also open avenues to doing other kinds of things that might be more or less transformative. Political scientists have argued that, who have looked at post-conflict societies, and we can't really call our society a post-conflict society. It's a constant conflict society, it seems. But who have studied transitional justice have argued, political scientists have argued that via transitional justice mechanisms, we can free political behavior from the trappings of the past, but that this requires that aggressors and victims, and I would add other implicated subjects, confront one another in the public sphere and move toward reconciliation together. I think about this increasingly as a challenge that is sort of like metabolizing the past. How do we as a social body process the past in a way that results in a healthier social body? And we know from other scholarship that around historical trauma that this is a really pressing question. Gabrielle Schwab writes in her book, Haunting Legacies, quote, "Unless trauma is worked through and integrated, it will be passed on to the next generation. And if this happens, the next generation will inherit the psychic substance of the previous generation and display symptoms that do not emerge from their own individual experiences, but from a parent's, relatives, or community's psychic conflicts, traumata, or secrets." She says, "We are haunted by the ghosts, that is the unfinished business of a previous generation." So how do we, through reparations mechanisms, deal with this haunting? How do we break this cycle and escape what the sociologist Emile Durkheim called the yoke of history? I think of this as a kind of processing of historical trauma whereby a community or a social body can metabolize the past by developing a more honest, inclusive, and healthy relationship to the past, promoting mutual understanding and community goodwill by preserving and acknowledging neglected and often difficult histories for the benefit of future generations. The aim here, through metabolizing, through the processing of, as a social body, the processing of the difficult past, is to reduce social distance and to promote solidarity through respectful recognition of a community's shared past. In theory, this will strengthen the social fabric, building bridges of trust and respect and cooperation and healing across differences, helping to unify and nourish and sustain community well-being. Now, I think this calls really for, to realize something like this requires that an approach to reparations combine both remedies of redistribution and remedies of recognition. Remedies of redistribution relate to the political economic structure of the society and the distribution of goods like rights and resources. But remedies of recognition, which I think we think and talk less about, deal with the cultural valuational sphere of the society. They deal with questions like respect, and erasure and cultural domination. And much of what we're doing through the Reparative Justice Coalition and through the placement of historical markers and so forth, the work with historic Black cemeteries, perpetually neglected, where the deceased are subject to disrespect and therefore their contemporary descendants are subject to the same disrespect. These are all examples of remedies of recognition. These acts of paying respect, one of the things we're doing with Washington Slavery Project is looking at St. Louis street names and how many of them have enslaver namesakes. And so far it appears that just about all of them do. I mean, I don't have the exact figure yet, but it is many, many, many City of St. Louis street names have enslaver namesakes. Paying respect through the disavowal of those namesakes is an example of a remedy of recognition. There are efforts to commemorate the slave pens and the other slave sort of aspects of the slave trade in the city of St. Louis through markers, but also potentially memorial works. Those would be examples of paying respect to the lives of people who've been subject to this historic violence and its legacy. Let me close with a question that I posed in a speech I gave earlier this year, the MLK commemoration, the theme of which was the beloved community. And the question is, can St. Louis become the beloved heart of America? We know that we have been described as the broken heart of America. And I don't mean to dispute that characterization at all. I think it is a compelling and accurate account of our history and our relationship to the nation as relates to the circulation of things like white supremacist ideology and the structural violence of racism and so on. But our reparations project as a city, as a community, might be seen as a kind of open heart surgery. If we go that far with it, whereby we have the potential to reconstruct St. Louis as the beloved heart of America. Now, Dr. King's notion of the beloved community, if you're not familiar with it, was a community organized by mutual understanding and universal goodwill. I believe we have the potential to undertake a civic experiment that might model strategies for turning a notoriously divided city like ours into something that looks more like Dr. King's vision of the beloved community, a community where racism and poverty and militarism have given way to mutual respect, universal goodwill, and collective well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ward, for enlightening us in a quite powerful way. So this is an opportunity to field questions from the commission and from the audience for Professor Ward. I first have one question, and it is how reparations are perceived by Greater America. When I say Greater America, the totality of Americans, which really begs the need to have a language which really promotes the enlightenment of America through reparations. Not the removal or the social engineering that we hear about, but this really is an enlightenment. So you use the term, let me make sure I quote you. You use the term corruption of moral law, which really is consistent with Dr. King's philosophy of really talking about injustice being a moral issue, and that we need to start talking about morality as a way of really bringing people together, that unified language. Some will say that that's perhaps too light, and it doesn't address the the major, the severe hardship that African descendants experience. So I'm just curious about you use that term.
Yeah.
I want to see if you want to expound on that.
Sure. Thank you. I'm happy to say more about that. I used to teach a class called the Ethics and Politics of Justice, and the reason I developed that class was because I was realizing that many of the students I interacted with had never been offered an opportunity to actually reflect on what justice means. And they had, and this, they started teaching in the early 2000s, really, and so they only knew justice as retribution. And so we used political theory and moral philosophy to really unpack the idea of justice. And one of the things I know from that, and I know from other interactions, is that people, the idea of morality itself has been sort of trampled as as this sort of naive notion or antiquated idea that, that doesn't get to the substance of things. But it is a basic question, which is, what is right? And what is our argument about what makes something right or wrong? And this is the question that the moral philosophy takes up. Now, what I was suggesting in my argument that the history, legacy of settler colonialism more generally, but slavery and various other offshoots, including racial terror, lynching, that this history needs to be understood in part as corrupting the moral universe. The point I'm making here is that these histories have distorted the way we think about who we have moral obligations to and who we don't have moral obligations to. This is the idea of the moral universe. And for those of you who are interested in thinking more about this, there's a fantastic book, a classic book called The Racial Contract by a black moral philosopher, political theorist, I should say, named Charles Mills, where he writes about the way that the social contract, this agreement we all enter into in order to treat each other with some level of decency because it's in our own interest to do so and so on, how the social contract has been underwritten by a racial contract and also a sexual contract that defines some people as less than full persons, less than fully deserving of the rights and so forth of the social contract. And we've inherited this, in very explicit and often subtle ways. I was just taking my students to the Missouri Botanical Garden last week in my class on monumental anti-racism, and one of my students who's from the Little Dixie region, quote unquote, of Missouri, young white woman, was talking about the history of slavery at Missouri Botanical, Henry Shaw's history of enslavement, which is connected to our own history at WashU. Henry Shaw founded the School of Botany. It's really the seed of all the plant sciences at WashU. But she kept talking about, she kept saying, this. I was reading about this slave, and I said, one of the things that communities are doing now is being very intentional about the language we use about enslaved people, enslaved women, men, and children, so that we don't reify the dehumanization of the language we've inherited. This is an example of the inheritance that is riddled with these kinds of moral codes where people are reduced to their status as slave rather than recognized as men, women, and children who were enslaved. So I do think that, to go directly to your question about reparations as an enlightenment, I do think that it is crucial that this pursuit of reparations include a very deliberate effort to build a kind of collective cultural memory around what slavery and its legacy is, and including around things like how slavery relates to the corruption of the moral universe. Yeah, the last thing I want to say about this, because I find it really interesting, and you'll notice it if you haven't already. There is increasingly, seemingly, people take pride in not caring. I think there was a book about this, like the art of not caring, or not. I think it had a more colorful title than that. I saw this woman the other day that had a shirt on that said "Free Shrugs." You know, we have our political culture, I would say, has become so corrupted that it is a point of pride to not care about the well-being of your fellow human being. And that is, I would argue, a legacy of a legacy we're living with in a settler colonial society.
Okay. Thoughts are going to have for a long time. Thanks for that. Questions from the Reparations Commission?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm interested in the research you're doing related to Washington University and their involvement with enslavement. The founders who built their wealth on the backs of many black people. And I also know that WashU, like most of these institutions of higher learning in the state, did not admit African Americans either. And I was just wondering, what is WashU going to do with this information?
Yeah. Great question. Well, let me say two. Let me make. I want to make two. At least say a couple of things. One is. There is. WashU is not a singular entity. That's one thing I want to say. There are 3 people on the stage right now who have formal relationships with this institution and who are going to do things with this information that maybe others at WashU won't do or won't be inclined to do. So I want to say that I don't think the university is at a point now where the university leadership is at a point now where there's any clarity about what we can and should do based on what we know. We've been doing this now for 2 years, and and this isn't to say that this needs to go on for 50 years before we have any ideas, but we are still really unraveling a complicated, nearly 150-year story of an institution that, in a city with a relatively, compared to a place like UVA, for University of Virginia, for example, where the institution itself, or Georgetown, where the institution itself owned enslaved people, we have a relatively complicated story to unpack. But it is coming. Some insights are coming into view, and there will be more and more pressure on the institution to act on those insights. And that's already beginning. One of the things that was done recently was the chancellor established a commemoration and remembrance committee to deal with the problematic namesakes we have of several of our buildings and so forth. But this is really, I think, just the beginning of what will be a further reckoning. The other thing I want to share is, we were really surprised to learn that, in fact, WashU did admit African American students in its early years and then stopped by the end of the 1880s and into the 1890s. As the nation overall is moving into this period of the Black Nadir, this kind of really virulent moment of white supremacist redemption that leads to the establishment of Jim Crow or the apartheid era of our nation's history. But small numbers of African Americans graduated from WashU, especially from the law school. First African American to argue before the Missouri Supreme Court was a WashU graduate. And what you see happening by the 1890s, and again, we don't have a lot of information yet on what explains this abrupt exclusion of black students. But you do see some evidence, that white students begin to complain in the 1880s about the presence of black students as a sort of degrading the prestige of the institution and therefore the value of their degree, and the university capitulates. I doubt that this was an entirely student-driven decision. I think it's probably more so a reflection of how the nation at large was moving. But the fact remains that we've not been able to identify more than 10 African Americans who graduated from WashU before the mid-20th century. And this is a profound, this is a profound indictment of an institution that is facilitating the social mobility of individuals through higher education, and also helping to shape various fields of endeavor, from medicine to the arts and everything in between. This history of exclusion is something we will have to grapple with. And that's why I want to understand it better, to make the argument, to make more precise arguments around the nature of our, the ways we're implicated and their implications for repair.
Other questions? We want to get really crisp questions, but I really want to engage the audience. So really crisp questions and
crisp answers. I know you're talking to me.
Yeah, I as a follow-up to that, do you have any sense of Washington University at least creating space within its curriculum to bring truth or correction to the harm around the treatment of African Americans in St. Louis?
Absolutely. And there are ways this is translating already. I think in a general sense, as a higher education institution, we have an opportunity, and I would say an obligation, to use our story to see deeper understanding, to go back to Dr. Ross's question, to use our own story to ensure that more of our students have an understanding of structural racism. What is structural racism? And are better equipped, not only intellectually, but emotionally and otherwise, to sit with difficult questions and difficult histories. We see right now in our political culture that people, particularly disproportionately white Americans, have like an existential crisis when you start talking about slavery. They get incredibly uncomfortable and don't want to be, and are uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Have a sense that they have Du Bois wrote about this in The Souls of White Folks, this sense that they have, and people never talk about Du Bois' Souls of White Folks. We need to popularize it more. But have the sense of entitlement to not ever being uncomfortable. And the university creates an environment where you can work with students to come out of that space and into another one. In fact, one of the reasons we joined the University Studying Slavery Consortium is the chancellor invited a number of senior professors who study race and justice issues, and I'm going to wrap up on this point, but he said several years ago, in the wake of the killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and others, in that wave of Black Lives Matter struggle, he asked, what more can we do as an institution to contribute to dismantling structural racism? And I said we should join University Studying Slavery, in part so that we can create more touch points for our students, our faculty, our staff, to engage these kinds of questions, which they otherwise would only encounter in a handful of classes every year. But now we have this institutional initiative that has the potential to bring more folks into that work, and I'm happy to say more about how we're approaching that, but I want to be mindful of the time.
Okay, my question was, you mentioned that St. Louis is the beloved heart of America, and that we're in a time where we're performing this open heart surgery, right? And so my question is, could you reiterate for the commission, when we're looking at reparations, could you reiterate your main point that you wanted for us to, just to clarify, what should we be looking at when we are looking at reparations?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I want to reiterate that I posed the question that, can we become the beloved heart of America? Will our reparations process approach constitute something like open heart surgery in the context of a place that's been characterized, I think, accurately as the broken heart of America. So, and to me, what that would mean is, first of all, taking the time to really grapple with the depth of the problem before us. I mentioned, for example, that the people in St. Louis who've been impacted by the history and legacy of slavery are, to some extent, all the people. And there are immediate descendants of formerly enslaved people who were enslaved in Missouri who are in St. Louis, who have perhaps a particular claim to make, but they are accompanied by people whose connections to slavery are through other places, but the legacies live here with them. And my own family history. I'm mixed race. My biological father is African American man from South Carolina. I have a family history of enslavement in South Carolina. My adoptive mother is a black woman from Chicago by way of North Carolina. I have a history of enslavement of my family in North Carolina. I live in St. Louis. The legacies, whatever negative inheritance I have through my family lines related to slavery are with me and my family here in St. Louis. And I know this is a really this is a real challenge for a city to, a city-based reparations project initiative to really grapple with. But I think at the very least, it can be part of the way our city reparations initiative explains the problem before us, even if it does not translate into all of the remedial strategies that grow out of the initiative, because there will have to be some difficult choices made. And there are 87 municipalities in St. Louis. I mean, so much of there is so much need, really, for a greater St. Louis reckoning with slavery in its wake that would bring in St. Charles and everything between St. Charles and East St. Louis and some of the north and south boundaries. So it's a really complicated place, and story. But I do think that through remedies of recognition and through remedies of redistribution, we can at least engage some of the scope of that problem.
Just a quick follow-up to Commissioner Brooks's question and your response right there. I mean, I think it's really powerful, and I really appreciate this kind of dual remedy model where you're thinking about redistribution and recognition, especially in a climate where I think oftentimes recognition is viewed skeptically as kind of an end around to avoid actual redistribution of resources. And so I'm curious, as we think about our work, are there examples you would point to where we see that kind of dual action happening, or do you see it as more of an aspirational opportunity that we might have?
Yeah, I have to confess that I've not studied reparations closely. I've been so focused on the question of the legacy that I've sort of not wanted to skip to the question of the answer. I've been trying to understand the legacies, the histories and the legacies better. I don't have good examples, certainly not examples of demonstrated best practices of integrated approaches. But I think it's just logically the case, at least, that you really can't do one without the other. And they really are mutually constitutive. I mean, there's a great quote, I can't remember from who says, she's writing about Black heritage preservation and says, Black histories need the same protections as Black lives because imperilment of the two is intertwined. And you see this with Black cemeteries, for example. The disrespect to the deceased in historic Black cemeteries conditions us to be insensitive to the suffering and death and dying of African Americans today. Now, addressing something like that, the situation with historic black cemeteries all around the country, would call on us for both remedies of recognition and redistribution. How do we deal with, as a financial matter, the fact that these are private entities dependent upon voluntary donations, where structural racism undermines the capacity for communities, African American communities, to sustain those wealth inequalities, undermines the potential to sustain those kinds of institutions. Perhaps a redistributive remedy in the way, I think about this a lot with WashU's, there's no blade of grass out of place at WashU. They have like an army of landscape folks. And how do you get institutions, private and public sector, to contribute resources to the preservation of these neglected spaces, for example? But it requires also recognition. And I think, this will be, to go back to Dr. Ross's first question about enlightenment, if we don't do the work of socializing a common understanding of something like the nature of our structural inheritance of the legacy of slavery, including the corruption of the moral universe, and why it's important to protect black histories as a way of protecting black lives. If people don't understand that basic idea, the opposition to investment in that kind of work, which is a redistributive agenda, will be greater. If we can build a common understanding, I was referring to this as cultural memory, if we can create a shared cultural memory around this, more and more of of the people of Greater St. Louis will see how it is in our collective interest to invest in repair.
Thank you. So, thanks for the panel for the questions. At this time, we're going to entertain questions, and as you have questions, you can direct them to either Professor Ward or to the commission, but please just state what person or group you want to direct your questions.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your excellent presentation, Dr. Ward. I am Safia Shaban, here with my brother, Stephen, and my cousin, Robin. Would you please stand so everybody can see? Where she's over there with the film. We are descendants of the St. Louis U, the SLU. Mm-hmm. Our ancestors were enslaved by St. Louis University, and we've been known about this since 2016. And we already knew about some of our ancestors, like Louis Chauvin and Sylvester Chauvin I. And but we found out, more information. And we're working on commemorative, restorative, and reparative justice. And it's a bunch of us here in St. Louis and other places, New Orleans, So we're tracing, we're in touch with our people all over whose ancestors were enslaved here in St. Louis University. They helped build St. Louis University. What I wanted to reiterate, or what I wanted you to touch upon, was the historical interconnection of the reparations movement. I heard you speak about Nova Scotia, and I know that a lot of the reparation activists have been all over the world, and other places, Africa, the Caribbean, everywhere. And so we have to realize this is an international movement, and we can gain strength if we are more unified, working together. And that's what some of the people have been doing. Lawyers, activists, scholars.
Clarify the question, because we really want to give everyone 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm going on and on. All right. Yeah, I just wanted you to you know, mention the connection internationally so that some people can gain strength and know it's not just a St. Louis or not just a United States problem. We were enslaved all over the world, and we are working with other people, other, entities to solve this long, long problem.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and questions. I apologize. I'm not an expert on the reparations movement. I am familiar with the global nature of it and the historically long-standing nature of the movement for reparations. I'm more familiar with the national and global sort of dimensions of the system of slavery itself and the struggle for freedom. I do want to just use this opportunity to reiterate the point, though, that St. Louis is, in a very meaningful way, a world city. I'm originally from California, and I've been struck since I've been in St. Louis the last 6 years or so, how often people talk about St. Louis, that I encounter, talk about St. Louis as a place that seemingly exists unto itself in isolation. And what I was trying to stress about the stories of the Mississippi River as a passageway, and also my own example, my own family history, the story I shared about the young man from Sumner High School, is that St. Louis is deeply connected to the American story and by extension, the global story of slavery. It was, I think it's accurate to say, St. Louis was the most significant northern United States port in the late period of slavery, by virtue of its connection to the Mississippi River. And also, I want to stress, we were just at the Missouri Historical Society yesterday in the Research Center. So much of the story about slavery in St. Louis involves enslavers selling enslaved people in southern slave markets after the abolition of the African slave trade. This was a major, and I should say, many of these are Missouri enslaved. I was reading about this. We came across this incredible ledger of an enslaver named, I think it was John or Joseph White, from Howard County, Missouri, whose business was buying enslaved people and then selling them for profit. But they would typically go through the port of St. Louis to, mostly he was selling enslaved people in Louisiana from Missouri. This is our history of enslavement here is deeply connected to the histories of other places in this country and beyond.
So again, just clarification for questions. If you're going to direct them to Professor Ward, please say so. If you're direct them to the commission. We do want to allow 3 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to use this red card so that you all stay on time. So if you see him wave a red card, that means you have to surrender the microphone.
Hi, Catherine with Action St. Louis. I have a question for the professor. So I know that, we listened to, the information that you provided, which is actually great information. And I know a couple of the members asked exactly what is Washington University doing with the information. And I don't know if I didn't hear you answer. The only thing that I heard you say was, now that you all are incorporating, the information that we have, to the students that are there, to, so they'll become comfortable or with hearing the information. And, so other thing I'm saying is that we know the stories, we know the history, white people know the history. And to me, I don't know why it feels like, their validation or their understanding is even necessary at this point. And if that's even a good use of the time or the resources to get them to be comfortable or to understand, what, the racism is, because it's here, they, started it. I just want to know, what is Washington University doing to rectify with the community, not with the comfort level of white people or the transgressors, or to make them feel comfortable? Because at this point, their validation just isn't needed. So,
yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to argue. Respectfully disagree with you that we know the story. We don't know that. We don't know. I can tell you, we know that people were enslaved by individuals connected to Washington University. But one of the problems with the historical record is the suppression of the identities of enslaved people. One of the things we would like to do is better identify individuals who were enslaved so that we can engage descendant communities. This is a process that requires research and that is ongoing. And the first thing I said in response to that question before is that we have not been at this long enough to really have the kinds of clear answers we would like to have to engage with different stakeholders in the community, including descendants of people who were enslaved by officials of the university. And so we're working on that. In the meantime, we're engaging students, African American students, other students, white students, and others in the work, in the research itself. One, because we think this will help us come to some insights more quickly, and also because we believe that this is beneficial as an educational exercise. We are an educational institution. We think this would be useful for students to have that experience so that they are, not to make them feel comfortable, but to make them aware of the reality of the history and the legacy of slavery that implicates their university, implicates, by extension, them. And so this is what we're working on. You know, what the university, so how the university will, at the end of the day, translate all of this into action is not, at this point, known, in part because we're only beginning to unpack the story.
Hello, I can answer. My name is Robin Prouty. I'm the founder and executive director of the Descendants of the St. Louis University Enslaved. And I do agree with you that, for example, at SLU, a lot of the students are not aware of the history of their institution. They talk about the first 12 Jesuits that came from Maryland, but they don't talk about our ancestors who came along with them. So I want to ask the commission a question, but I do want to address St. Louis University did the research. They started in 2016. They contacted the descendants in 2019. And to this day, nothing has really been done. I don't know if you're aware of our petition for St. Louis University to recognize and acknowledge us, which is 5 types of reparations. That is a form called satisfaction, to erect a monument. We have a petition out right now. We don't understand what the issue is. And to give an example of what you're talking about in terms of what is a university doing. So at the time, 2021, we met with President Costello. And he's aware that 11 presidents who are all Jesuit priests sanctioned and enslaved our ancestors, 11 presidents. So my question first to the board, what's your process are you tapping into the other commissions? Because there are 75 reparations initiatives around the country. Are you tapping into those like the California Task Force, Robin Ruth Simmons in Evanston, Illinois? Are you tapping into those resources, learning San Francisco, what they're doing with their commissions, their best practices? How are you going about that process? That's my first question.
So the answer is yes. We're aware of what's going on. The answer to the question is yes. We are aware. We have data, we have stories, we have reports from California, from all the cities you mentioned. And all of that is going to be factored into our final analysis, looking at those responses, looking at the approaches they take, looking at the approaches that could be actually implementable here in St. Louis. So absolutely, we're not working in a vacuum.
Great. And I don't know if you know about the Reparations Conference Symposium that's coming up, where all those commissions I just mentioned will be there. And I think I sent Vernon the email as well. And you guys need to know about that because it's a wealth of information. Legislators, everybody in the reparations game, in Cobra, Robin Ruth Simmons, Cam Howard, Sheila Jackson Lee, everybody attend these, and I think would be great for the commissioners. One more thing, and I'm gonna go because I know somebody else. I just want to say that it is important that we understand the connection, like these universities and all the different multi-dimensional harms from, like Sister Gibson, even after slavery. All this contributes to what has happened to us in this city, and that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Excuse me, ma'am. Are you going to be staying after are you going to be leaving soon?
I can stay. I can stay if you want to talk and everything, too.
Or I can just come down.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Greetings in the name of shedding light on this very vital issue. And my comment or question is, yes, my name is Lorene Patton of Hyde Park, St. Louis City, and I like to address the Department of the Mayor's Office as well as the Commission in relevancy to how the Mayor is addressing parents of students in public schools. Is that a contributing factor to what we're doing here, and not to exclude seniors and then parents that students are out of school?
So, yeah, we're not going to be able to answer that question. I think that we're going to take input, record that question, and that question will then be posed to the mayor and the mayor's office to give a much more expansive answer. We want to make sure that any responses we provide are going to actually meet the true nature of your question. And so,
could you reiterate your question for me so I can make sure that I heard it clearly?
Yes, please. So to have a process of elimination in what we're doing in this whole idea of reparations, the mayor has processed an issue where she's going to formulate dollars for parents who has students in the St. Louis public school system. So without to exclude elders and individuals where students have already graduated, to not exclude them or they become exempt. So to consider that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, your question is taken and will be presented. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Antoine, and I hail from the Hamilton Heights neighborhood. First thing I was wondering, I understand that we have an opportunity now to ask a question of the presenters and the commission. Will this be the only time that statements will be taken from the public today, or will we come back for something else after this, as far as being able to speak?
Yes, we're going to have two more forums in November and in December. Our final forum, public forum, will be in December.
But as far as today, once a person leaves this microphone, we won't be back as of today, right? Is that
no, but after today, after we formally conclude, many of us will still be here and we'll be able to talk offline independently.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, what I'll do, I heard you mention, and I'll give you some things to think about, and maybe you can have some feedback on it. You were mentioning justice, and you were mentioning how justice was feared in a way by some of your students or people that you was talking to, and that a lot of people didn't have an understanding of what justice meant. And so for us, for the grassroots of Black Americans, we recognize justice as guaranteeing that no one is mistreated, and also guaranteeing that those who need help the most get the most constructive help. So this is the definition of justice that we go on. Now, of course, a guarantee is just that. That doesn't mean nothing's going to happen. It just means if something happens, then there's a system in place to to negate it and to repair. Okay, so justice, that's justice. As far as the ideas of bringing people together. That's a beautiful thing. It's an admirable goal, but it was not necessary to bring everybody together to get our family who are, say, for example, same-sex marriages. It wasn't necessary to bring everybody together. You still have the majority of Americans who are against that, but fortunately, we live in America where, it's a republic. Individual rights won through in the end, and that's what we want to see as far as this reparations. I guess the last thing that I'll ask you, I guess I'll put it in the form of a question. How can we impress upon, and this is for the presenter, what else can we do to impress upon you that we must have direct cash payment repair? Like, what do we have to do to really get that point across? So that's the question. And the last thing I'll say is, I traced my lineage back to 1803 on one side and 1830 so far on the other, using nothing but speaking to my elders and census records. I didn't even have to go into a bunch of other records that I'm going to go into to go back even further and get an even fuller picture of my ancestors' lives. So there's a process that's already being worked out by descendants of enslaved people here in this country, Black Americans. So that's really my question. What's the next step? Because we've asked, and it's been decades and centuries. So any advice that you can give from your perspective on how we should move forward to make sure that we get direct cash payments to those who are descendants of the enslaved. Because as you can look around, I don't see it's a lot of going on in the world. I don't see any representatives of those countries that are going to war here to speak for us. So we have to speak for ourselves. So, what can we do to push that forward? That's the question.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Well, I want to clarify that I'm not a member of the commission, and I wasn't invited to speak, and I wouldn't speak on behalf of St. Louis or Black St. Louis. I was invited to talk about my own work and the insights from my own work that might pertain to the challenging task of the Reparations Commission. So I'm sorry if I gave people the impression that I was claiming to represent the point of view of anyone else but my own, but that's not the case. I do want to say also, because you mentioned the research, and I meant to add this, one of the things we've done with the Wash U in Slavery Project, in my capacity as director of the project, I've been committed from the beginning to organizing this in a public-facing and engaging way, in a way that the other thing I said to the chancellor when I made the argument that we should join this consortium is that we would, by doing that, establish our institution as a more useful partner in this region's reckoning with slavery because of the research we would do and what we would learn and what we could share. And so I want to invite you all to go to our project website, but I want to specifically mention that we have created a web-based database called the St. Louis Integrated Database of Enslavement, where we've taken historical census records and manumission records and other records that document enslavement in St. Louis and made them searchable electronically through this website. So you can put in the name of an individual who you know to have been enslaved. You can put in the name of an individual, an enslaver. You can search by precinct in the city of St. Louis and more easily find records from the 1840, 1850, 1860 censuses and other records that pertain to enslavement in St. Louis. And we hope this is a resource as more and more of our community members are investigating these questions.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Michael Gregory. I represent 13th Ward of St. Louis City. I grew up in Ferguson, Missouri. I'm gonna make it quick. Okay, so one interesting thing that we can take care of that's been a model already for actual payments, lineage-based payments, would be the Japanese Americans There's a book, Japanese Americans from Relocation to Redress by Sandra C. Taylor and Harry H.L. Catano, that goes through all of the things that we're going through, because specifically Black Americans, they're the ones that are harmed and they can be identified. You're looking at many of us in this room that know our genealogy. I know mine back to 1835. And it's very easy to go into census records. Okay, and so there have been many reparations paid out through the United States. Hold on, my phone just died. I'm trying to get all this out. Yeah, so they've given away $30 million in 2003, United States, to Samoa, Guam, Hawaii. They gave out $3.5 billion to the Marshall Islands and Micronesia. Go to the Japanese, they gave them $1.6 billion. So all of these talks and all of this wasn't necessary for them to get their money. So we're losing a lot of people. We're dying every day. We have Black businesses that are on life support that need a cash infusion, that will do well, that to create the Black Wall Streets, that can make all kinds of things that will be beneficial for the whole St. Louis. So we have to make sure that this isn't a all reparations lives matter movement. This is a repair for Black Americans that trace their lineage back to slavery. That must be very, very impressed upon on it. And I have a .com, ConsciousOutlawedMedia.com. I've been transcribing and I've been putting things into the commission to work on, to get the understanding of lineage base, prioritizing cash payments, and letting everybody know that the reparations conversation around the country, it has a lot of different aspects, and a lot of things aren't getting right. I was in contact with a person from Evanston, Illinois. They're not happy with their reparations. In California, there's problems here. So this is an opportunity for us to get it right and to be a real example, so we can remove the stain of Dred Scott. And with that being said, there's a historical Black cemetery called Greenwood Cemetery, whose Harriet Scott body is laid up in, and it was desecrated last year. I know the president of the Preservation Board, Raphael Morris, he has struggled to get help because it's just desecrated. Someone came in and destroyed it. So inside of reparations, that would be a token thing to do as far as looking after the lineage and the people that were hurt. But the cash payments have to be there, and they have to be in a lump sum. $1 million per person is not a lot. You can break it up to $250,000 per quarter in a 1 year period. Anything less than that needs to be a lump sum. So San Francisco, they already got $5 million per person. There are numbers out there, and we have to just be careful when we talk to other reparations commissions, and we have to understand what's specific for St. Louis. What's good for us may not be good for them. What's good for them might not be good for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, once again, thank Professor Ward for delivering that address and enlightening all of us. Thank you. So, we have questions. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Travis Cotton. I moved back here from St. Louis from California after my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Comes to turn out, her house was the cause of that cancer. We live in a city where you don't know what you're living on. There's environmental issues. There's issues where if I told you that you have to spend $1,200 in order for you to live in your house, not everybody is able to come and fix those type of issues. The issues that I've experienced here in St. Louis are worse than any that I've experienced anywhere else. Now, when I moved away from St. Louis, I was proud to be from here. I said, you know what? Let me move back home, be close to my family. But the issues that are they go on here, it's a battle. It's control. I've never felt as controlled as I have from a city like I feel it here. It comes down to property. It's not who you are, it's where you are. They treat you like a statistic, no matter if you have a master's degree, a doctorate degree. As soon as I tell a person where I'm from, whenever I'm speaking to anyone from the city, they treat me a certain type of way. Whenever it comes to purchasing properties in a certain area, you live in these areas, they force you to live around vacant properties. If you say, I'll buy it so I can change it, they don't want that. When it comes to reparations, I'm not looking for money. I'm looking for them to stop the control. I'm looking for them to do things such as clear my titles. Don't continue to control me. Don't continue to control the next person. The money would be a nice aspect to it, but if you're going to add a control aspect to that reparation, then it's going to continue to be the same. So I just wanted to I don't even know. I just wanted to talk to you guys and let you guys know that if St. Louis really wants to change as far as reparation, they can stop with the control. It's the control that's going on today. I'm not worried about the slavery, what happened to my ancestors. We've won throughout all of those battles. Each and every battle that they gave my ancestors, they still found a way to win. I am the first of my ancestors to come back here and almost lose everything to St. Louis. I've told them about the redlining, about the discrimination, about this and that, and we are in the year 2023. I should not be feeling these type of strongholds on myself, on my community, on my family, my house. It was not going to be safe to live if I didn't stop the gas leak. I had to lie to the gas company and tell them that I'm white in order for them to come and stop a gas leak. That made me feel very, very devalued. My neighbors have complained about that same gas leak for 3 years, 4 years. They said, oh, we used to it by now. I'm not used to that. I'm not used to it. I really want for St. Louis to change and be for the better, but it's going to have to change as far as a whole, across multiple sections, across multiple departments, across a whole. We have to stop this treating people the way that they are in a place. We have to treat everyone equal. If I'm in the Central West End, treat me the same. Treat me the same in North St. Louis as you would a person that's in Ladue. I'm not saying treat me white, just treat me right. So, that's it.
No, I just want to say, related to that comment and the previous comment, my question really for the commission is what does it look like to do this right? And whatever the dollar number is, how does that get invested so that it is transformative? I mean, I think I really appreciate your comment, and that is, I think that is the question before us. How do we ensure that this process puts us in a different place as a community and through the repair directed towards those most impacted by the history and legacy of slavery?
I'm Faith Sandler. It's good to see you and hear you in person today, Dr. Ward. I live in Skinger-de-Bolivar, and I'm the director of the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis, which works hard on some reparative and restorative efforts in higher education in the community. So it's to that I want to pose a question. So among the things that I appreciated about Broken Heart of America was the clear illustration of the ways in which capitalism and racism have intersected so deeply in this place. And so when you're positing the beloved heart of America, I want to make it a case for not leaving out the role of institutions and philanthropy and philanthropists in perpetuating racism and the supremacy of capitalism, primarily in the hands of white people in this community to this day. And so my question to you is whether the work of documenting the history at an institution like Washington University will translate into anything that might make different the current policies and practices of the institution with regard to admissions, financial aid, and the support of the communities surrounding the university. So it is beautiful to do the research, but if the research stays, if we don't clean our own house and the way we interact with the community, I don't see how that actually benefits the creation of beloved community here and now.
Yeah, I agree completely. And you know, research has a dirty word, but the only, I know this isn't your point, but the only point I'm making in stressing the need for the research is that it gives us leverage to make arguments for remedy. And I'll give you an example. I mean, WashU is today and historically deeply implicated in the unequal access to land and to ownership and to gentrification. It's deeply connected to the history of gentrification. But we don't know. We have only a fraction of that story. It's not a story the university is proud of, so it hasn't documented it in very clear ways that are easy to just unveil and share with. The university is doing things to address the issue of admissions and funding students with things like need-blind admission and the like. But there are all kinds of problems, and I agree with you that if the work does not translate into meaningful changes in terms of how WashU relates to its neighbors and so forth, that it will be limited in terms of its impact. And just to go back to where you started with capitalism, I mean, this is a fundamental challenge within our nation of any approach to transformative justice. How do you achieve transformative justice in the context of a society that remains committed to a market economy and how do you abolish racial capitalism, where racism and capitalism are both value-driven kinds of constructs, and so certainly something like the WashU and Slavery Project is not going to end racial capitalism. What it will help us do, I think, is will help more people understand what racial capitalism is, and perhaps build more of a public investment in thinking about alternative ways to organize our lives, our institutions. I'll leave it there.
Good afternoon. My name is Malika Horn. I live in the Central West End. And the prior speaker talked about the private sector, and I know she does good work with low and moderate income students. I don't know if it's considered reparations or not. And when you were talking about some of the issues that people of color grapple with, African Americans in particular, I don't know if that's reparations or if that's based on our democratic rights that are sorely missing at this point. But my question is regarding the mayor and the aldermen, the committeemen. I know this is a public issue, and there has to be some kind of involvement and investment and some kind of agreement that this is something that's going to happen. Because I think that the people here are, just to put it bluntly, they're waiting on their checks. So this is a question to the commission. Have you been talking to the mayor? Is there ongoing dialogue with the alder people? Do they know what the reparations is doing? Is it just going to be a report and then the public sector, the aldermen and committeemen and all of the city government, do they take it up from there? Or is there something going on right now so they won't be shocked by your results?
So let me answer that. So it's so good seeing you. Thank you for being here. I hope the community recognizes who you are and what you've done, what you contributed to this community. So here's the process. We are having these public forums, getting input from you over this past 7 months. We're going to compile that report. That report will be presented to the mayor and to the aldermen. But there will be sufficient time to have you, the community, review that report also before it's finalized. And so after that series of review, then we'll have that report. The commission's role is simply to conduct the hearings, to compile the information, to bring in the thought leaders, and to present what we think is a cogent argument for reparations in St. Louis. The commission doesn't have any authority beyond that. That authority rests with the mayor and the Board of Aldermen. And so that's how this will work out. And I think we have to we have to be active, we have to be engaged. But after this work is done, I think work is done. Many have already said that. That's when, after the commission's work is done, that's when the real work has to be done. There has to be an engagement, a calling out of those who have the authority to implement the recommendations. So that's where we need you. Thanks.
Good day. My name is Andre Owens. I'm in Blackjack, Missouri. It's where I reside. But I'm born and raised here in St. Louis. I just really have more so of a statement. Most everyone here in St. Louis is aware that the Dred Scott case was heard here in St. Louis, which how the Civil War actually began, right? Okay, but when the war was won, how come we're not having the discussion of 40 acres and a mule, which was promised to the freed slaves at that time, and there's no discussion of that? Yes, we're talking about compensation for slavery, but aren't those laws already on the books? They're just not being exercised, and why is that not the case? Is my question as far as reparations. I see we're having discussions, but are we actually making progress? Because it seems like we're studying more and keep studying and keep studying, and we're saying we keep having put more time into research and study and what have you than actually making progress. But I was invited here today by Ms. Brooks, Jada Brooks, but the conversation that I had with her was the Congress is actually discussing reparations, and they're actually using biblical. And if I could just give you my quick spiel, and just so that the people can hear it. Congress is using Genesis 15 and 13. Genesis 15 and 13 is God speaking to Abram. He put him into a deep sleep, and he saw his descendants in a land not their own, oppressed and enslaved for 400 years. I take you from there to Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28, if I'm speaking about Deuteronomy, I'm speaking of Moses speaking to God's children, okay? And so if I'm speaking of Moses, he has already led God's children out of Egypt, slavery in Egypt. However, we know the slavery in Egypt was not 400 years. It was about 200 years of slavery. So that's not the 400 years. The 400 years hasn't happened yet. Okay, so Deuteronomy 28 begins, blessings and prosperity will come unto you if you follow the law. But God's children, we already know, didn't follow the law. So the second half of Deuteronomy 28 is curses and re-enslavement will come unto you for not following the law. A country from far, far away will come up on you as swift as an eagle, the symbol of the new Egypt, and you will never see your homeland of your forefathers ever again. They will put rods or iron.
So I'm going to have to ask you, I'm going to have to cut it off. So if you will have a final comment, I would appreciate that. One final comment.
But just to complete it.
A final comment.
Okay. However, God's people, in a way Congress is still studying, they're already stating that those, as far as reparations, I guess my final comment is the 40 acres and the mule. what happened to laws that are already on the books that are not being addressed? How come it's not as simple as revisiting those laws, and how can we go about reacting them? Because the fact that we're talking about financial compensation, but right now we already know that the land is kind of bankrupt. But we do have richness in land, and is that going to be a part of the?
So your comments have certainly been noted. Well, thank you for those comments, and they have been recorded. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I am State Representative Collins, and I represent the city of St. Louis in the Missouri House of Representatives. And I guess my question is, because I believe in the coordination between all levels of government, and I know it feels like state government is kind of left out of this conversation. And so my question is for the commission is, what kind of collaboration are you all doing with those of us that sit at the state level? Even though we know we're in a majority Republican state legislature, there are still those of us that live in St. Louis City that are too, directly impacted by this conversation. And those of us that want to be able to represent fully on the state level, how can we help move the needle on a state level, even though we know we're in a Republican state legislature? And so I know that Congresswoman Cori Bush, thank you. I know that Congresswoman Cori Bush is, she filed legislation in March, a $14 trillion package bill at the federal level, but I never hear these conversations at the state level. And then my other question is, how do we, I guess it would be for the speaker, is how will we move the needle for financial institutions that have also benefited off of the backs of those individuals that have been enslaved? How do we hold those financial institutions in the state of Missouri accountable? So I may have a lot of questions, but I want to be included in this conversation because I'm not an expert on reparations, but I'm willing to represent at the state level to help move the needle, local and federal and state. I mean, I know it might not go much of anywhere in the state because, like I said, majority Republican, but starting the conversation is important. And I think that us legislators, especially those of us that are Black legislators representing the city of St. Louis, should be included in on these conversations. That is my question.
I really appreciate it. Are there any other questions?
I want to answer. Yeah, right.
We don't have that. Okay, sorry, we don't have that answer. No, let me finish here. No, we don't have that answer because I want to remind everyone that we acknowledge what Cori Bush, Representative Bush, and others are doing, and we respect that. We're operating under a mayoral order. So we're the St. Louis Reparations Commission. We're not the State of Missouri Reparations Commission. And so we need legislators like you to really realize what's going on here, to acknowledge that St. Louis is really a center and that we need this broad support. But we're, as a commission, are operating under a mayoral order, not a state order.
Right. I get that. Understand what efforts are you all making for collaboration between those of us that are state elected officials and the commission? Because I haven't. This is my first time meeting any of you all. Right. And I watched the meetings on YouTube, but I want to know what efforts are you all making so that we can collaborate and move the conversation a little bit further.
My response would be, I think that we are wanting support from anybody that we could receive. And the state will be an amazing support. And I know you were just speaking about some financial matters. And so if we are able to collaborate and talk more and have more conversations with you around what that could possibly look like in terms of state representatives and you as yourself, I think that is a conversation for us to have. Okay, so I think that is a good start
for the question that you're asking. Where is that support at? And I think we should be open to receiving help and support and collaboration from the state level, because I think that is an amazing point that you made. And so I just thank you for your time, and thank you for being here, and thank you for speaking up on behalf of the state.
Can I just add, the commission hearing is an effort. The commission inviting speakers, inviting the public, inviting the community to come and engage these really difficult questions is effort. And it is also studying the issue. It is, and, we are engaging each other around this question. I don't want us to miss the meaningfulness of what's happening right now in this room, and this is number 7 of, I guess, 9 of these hearings. So that is a significant effort to be recognized.
We have time for one final question.
Hi, I'm Marty, lifelong resident, City of St. Louis. I was at the September 27th meeting, and I remember Pastor Anthony using a Reparation Commission goal, I think you identified, as Christian autocracy communism. Did I understand that correctly? If you could confirm that. And if so, how would that be identified? And would there be any other commission members that commented, and maybe even Dr. Mitchell? Christian autocracy communism was the term that you used, in my understanding, as a Reparation Commission goal at the September 27th meeting. And if there's some clarification on it, I don't, nothing to follow up on, just.
I would say no. It was probably somebody that looked like me, but it wasn't me. I don't even know what that term is. So, in all truthfulness, I don't recall that.
I want to thank all of you. Oh, great. Again, let's give an thanks to Professor Ward. So we want to take time now to have feedback from the commissioners, and we'll start on the end with Reverend Anthony, and we'll get your thoughts as we wrap up here.
My closing thoughts. First of all, thank you, Dr. Ward, for your information. I consider it extremely powerful and helpful in this moment. I also want to say thanks to Representative Collins for her presence here. And I do believe that it is extremely important that we collaborate in this project, be it with the state reps, Representative Bush as well. And I know we haven't often mentioned it, but I want to give a shout out to the commission as well for the tireless work that we continue to put in, because I want to say that this work is not easy. And not only is it not easy, I can guarantee you we won't get everything right. But we will do our best in this process to make sure that, those needs or harms that have been projected onto the African American community will be met, because it is true what fits San Francisco and other places may not fit here, but we're going to do our best to get the job done. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I would echo, Reverend Anthony's notes of appreciation to Professor Ward for his presentation and comments throughout, to Representative Collins for being here, and to you all for participating the way that you have. I mean, one aspect of these meetings from our end is we did not want to, I mean, we keep hearing, rightfully so, that St. Louis is a unique place. It's an important place to be doing this work, but this isn't a one-size-fits-all process. And so we intentionally, through these meetings and otherwise, want to be a body that's responsive to the community rather than being up here to answer questions because we have already worked out our process from the beginning of our year-long appointment. And I think we're getting that very clearly. And I really appreciate having been here for all of the meetings throughout, of course, the way in which people's comments and questions have really been evolving. So we're hearing much more, not just about particular issues, but about issues of process, about issues of accountability, and these things are obviously really at the center of what we're trying to do. And so, beyond the responses that we give within these forums, these are all things that are being logged, recorded, and engaged with in terms of our work as we move towards recommendations. So thank you so much for contributing in those really pivotal ways.
Hey everyone. Again, my name is Jada Brooks, and I am the youngest member on the commission. And so I could understand feeling like you're silenced. I can understand. I just first want to thank you for coming. I encourage you, each and every one of you, to keep coming and speaking. Because sometimes as African Americans, that's all we've known how to do is to fight for what we want, for what we need, what is rightfully ours. And so I encourage you to keep coming and encourage more people to keep coming and to keep speaking out about your concerns and what you feel that needs to happen in terms of reparations. And so I do want to encourage you to bring a friend, to bring a friend, to bring a friend, and to come and to continue to speak. Don't let anybody silence you. Allow for your voice. Yes, do it respectfully and conduct yourself in a manner, because we as Black people, we are known for, misbehaving, right? But do it in a way that is respectful. And I encourage you that we are hearing your voices and that you are not being silenced. And I'm going to encourage you all to continue to make sure that you all are receiving this information, knowing that when on the city site, when these meetings are, the times that they are, and the locations that they are, so that way we can make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that it is known where these meetings are, what time they are, so that way everybody can show up and be their best selves. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, let me thank Professor Ward. I think he's deep in our understanding of these issues. I know he's been in the trenches for a long time doing this very important work and informing all of our work. So I appreciate you coming here and sharing that with all of us. But I also want to say that our audiences have also deepened our understanding of the issues. I'm always impressed with the people that come here and show their knowledge, their commitment to these issues and their passion. And I really appreciate that you come here. And even though we have a small audience, and as I was saying to Dr. Ross, it doesn't matter if there are 10 people here or 110 people here. We're still going to give out the same information. We're going to still listen to your voices. I know for so long, as a resident of North St. Louis, and also a Black resident of North St. Louis, a lot of times our voices are muted, so I'm very sensitive to that issue, and we want to make sure that you know that your voices are going to be amplified. And so thank you again for coming, and I hope you continue to come and voice your opinions about what this commission should be doing and holding our feet to the fire, and holding the mayor's feet to the fire and the Board of Aldermen's feet to the fire. That's what we're supposed to do. as citizens of of St. Louis. So thank you.
Professor Ward, you've given us inspiration, you've given us a lot of facts, and you've given us a sense of a purpose and direction, even more so than before. So again, I want to thank you for that presentation. We're almost wrapping up the open forums. We've heard a lot of comments. We've heard some anger, but we've heard some hope. And the goal is to capture all of those voices, every voice, and put that into the report. All the narratives will be captured. And so when we present this, again, we don't have the authority to implement it before we have a voice. And we will want to make sure that voice truly represents all those individuals we've heard over the past 7 and then up to the final 9 months. And so I would thank you for those who had an opportunity to speak today. I want to let you know we did hear you, and we look forward to having you review the report and provide your input going forward. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at the next commission meeting.